Hi, today we will explain the storyline of the movie Free LSD, which will be released in 2023. Okay, let's get straight to the story. Keith, a middle-aged man, has an adult video store that he has been running for a long time. One day, a customer leaves a video at Keith's store. On the same day, a pink-haired girl named Cece entered his shop. Without any shame, Cece introduced herself to Keith, telling him that she had a mobile coffee shop called You Are Here. After a brief introduction, Cece left, not forgetting to invite Keith to stop by her shop sometime. A few hours later, Keith was getting ready to close the shop. As usual, he cleaned the shop first before going home. On his way home, Keith stopped to refuel. Here, a strange man stared at him with a grin, then threw a cigarette at Keith. Keith suddenly dodged. After that, he continued his journey while listening to the radio with the theme of aliens, UFOs, and so on. Keith himself has a radio program called The Blowmind Show, which airs once a week on the theme of space creatures. Arriving at home, Keith immediately prepared to broadcast live with Jack Rogers, who was said to have been abducted by aliens and implanted. They started with small talk unrelated to the main topic. Jack mentioned that he heard a music that he could still hear to this day. 3 hours passed until 2 in the morning, and Jack had not gotten to the story of the implant that the alien gave him. However, the live stream had to end, and they promised to chat again in the second part. The next day, Cece returned to Keith's shop. This time, she was already waiting for Keith's arrival before the shop opened. She even brought him a glass of coffee from her shop that she made especially for Keith. They then chatted casually in the shop. Keith told her that his rental shop used to be just an ordinary video rental shop. However, he was not satisfied with what he was doing. He felt that being a shop owner was not his true identity. Long story short, they promised to meet again tonight at 10 o'clock. Cece then left Keith's shop, but before going far, a strange man who had thrown a cigarette at Keith the day before came back. This man honked at Cece, who was walking on the sidewalk, after which he stared at Cece with white glowing eyes. Cece was hypnotized until her nose bled, but after Keith showed up, the man left. Surprisingly, when Keith asked what the man had done, Cece couldn't remember anything. Keith came home from the shop at 11 o'clock at night because Cece hadn't arrived. Again, the mysterious man was bothering him. This time, he followed Keith until a tramp intercepted the man's car and started talking nonsense. The mysterious man did not like his behavior, so he shot the bum. Keith witnessed the entire incident from the glass of his car. However, the bum was not injured because the bullet hit his cell phone on his chest. The mysterious man did not accept this and continued to torture the bum to death. Keith also suddenly ran away in fear of witnessing the atrocity. Shortly thereafter, Keith arrived home safely. He immediately rested on the sofa and had time to dream about Cece, who strangely was with the mysterious man, and warned Keith. Keith was startled awake, after which he made a drink. He then turned on his laptop and saw an advertisement for a doctor who was looking for several volunteers for his business, the Brain Development Agency, BDA. Keith seemed interested in the doctor's specialty and decided to sign up. The next day, Keith came directly to the BDA office where he was greeted by the receptionist. This woman then asked Keith to fill out the registration form and wait on the sofa. There, a woman was waiting for her husband, who was consulting on male productivity issues in the doctor's office, and shortly afterwards, it was Keith's turn to be called. The friendly doctor asked Keith to tell him about the problem while lying in the patient chair, and he said that he was interested in volunteering for BDA. The doctor then explained that the test he was going to conduct was aimed at measuring the potential of the brain, after which Keith briefly told him about Cece. Surprisingly, the doctor said he knew about Cece, after which he told Keith to drink a secret formula directly from the tube for more comfort. Soon after, Keith felt something was wrong and saw the world around him begin to distort. In Keith's hallucination, the doctor told him that the potion he had just drunk was very special. He said it was not a narcotic, but a healing drug. Suddenly, he moved to a room all in white. In that room, someone in a beekeeper's uniform was waiting for Keith, but Keith didn't know who that person was. Keith then moved on to the next scene, where he is now on stage with a rock band called Off. He is the band's vocalist and is singing a song with lyrics about other lives. Shortly afterwards, they finish the gig, and Keith takes a short break in the waiting room to chat. His pickup arrives, and outside, Keith stops briefly to sign autographs. It turned out that the driver of the car was the male criminal who had previously been in Keith's reality and was bothering him. Keith had seen Cece outside the car, trying to warn him about something, but the driver drove on until he took Keith to a field and pointed a gun at him. He then told Keith to get out, and instantly, the man shot Keith until Keith woke up in his normal life. He still woke up in the doctor's room. Miraculously, he felt no longer restless and knew his true identity. He thought what happened was a dream, but the doctor assured him that it was not a dream, but Keith's true path in life. Thus, the doctor encouraged Keith to make the band off a reality and save human life with his music. As a first step, they had to meet the band members who appeared in Keith's vision. The first person was Dimitri, a successful music executive producer. In Keith's vision, Dimitri was the guitarist. Keith and the doctor met Dimitri, who was high at the time. Feeling that he had no appointment, Dimitri was forced to receive his guests with annoyance. He contacted security to take the two uninvited guests out. But the doctor quickly persuaded Dimitri with a mixture of Dimitri's favorite liquor plus his own medicine. Keith then said that he was the vocalist of the band Off, and Dimitri was his partner. The doctor then added that he knew Dimitri had been unhappy with his success because he had been obsessed with being a guitar player since he was a child. But after his father died, Dimitri was forced to run a business in the music field. In emotion, Dimitri began to be affected and told his security guard to return to his post. When the doctor's medicine took effect, Dimitri also moved to another life. Just like Keith, he arrived in an all-white room guarded by a person dressed as a beekeeper. Dimitri then performed the same song with Keith. The same sequence of events repeated itself as Keith had experienced, but this time it was Dimitri's turn to be shot dead by a mysterious man. Just then, Dimitri also returned to normal life. Now, he, Keith, and the doctor are on their way to pick up the next member of the band, the bass player Autry. Autry is known to be part of a spiritual group called We, which uses meditation as its main activity. At that time, Autry had just finished meditating with the group, so the doctor went to see the leader of the group and asked Autry to join them. Of course, he couldn't just hand Autry over, especially since he thought Autry was a potential member. The leader was willing to talk privately with the doctor first. While they were talking, the doctor hypnotized the leader and showed that Autry was created for Off in another life. Long story short, the leader finally released Autry. While waiting for the doctor and Autry in the car, Dimitri told Keith what he had seen in another life. Shortly thereafter, the doctor arrived with Autry. Without much ado, the doctor told Autry to take his herbal medicine. What happened next, just like Dimitri and Keith, in the band, Autry was known to have many female admirers. After their gig, Autry introduced different girls to the band members. They then said goodbye and intended to go on a date. However, halfway there, the woman named Nina asked him to stop by a convenience store. Autry waited for Nina outside, but suddenly, two policemen ambushed Autry. Meanwhile, Nina only watched the incident from inside the convenience store, but her eyes turned white like the mysterious man. In the midst of Autry's confusion, his cell phone suddenly rang. Autry intended to pick up the phone, even though the police told him to keep his hands up. Shortly afterwards, Autry was shot, after which he returned to normal life. When he came to, they were on their way to the hospital to pick up the last member of the band, DH, the drummer. DH was known to be a jazz drummer and liked to participate in contests until an accident put him in a coma. However, according to evidence on the ground, what DH experienced was not an accident, but someone targeting him. Shortly afterwards, the doctor's colleague, a BDA lab scientist, called him. In a panic, the man reported that their potency levels were almost depleted due to outside interference. The doctor said it was impossible because their lab was impenetrable, but his colleague didn't have much time to explain. They had to deal with it immediately. The doctor asked Keith and his friends to prepare to resolve this problem through another life, but he warned that most likely they would not be able to return to normal life. Keith said he wouldn't miss his normal life, nor would Dimitri and Autry. The doctor then injected DH in the arm. A few seconds later, a bee from nowhere stung the doctor's injection site and woke DH. The doctor immediately told DH to drink the potion, as did the other band members. Long story short, Keith, Dimitri, and Autry moved on to another life. Meanwhile, the criminal who was targeting DH suddenly appeared at the hospital. When he arrived, all the band members were already unconscious except for the doctor. The two of them then confronted each other, staring at each other with white eyes and attacking without touching. Here, it is known that the doctor is one of the foreign figures similar to the criminal, Nina, and the mysterious man, but his purpose is different. Shortly afterwards, the police came to investigate the commotion, but the doctor had already escaped. In another life, the band Off was greeted by three beekeepers who now showed their faces. It turned out that they were none other than Nina, the mysterious man, and the criminal. They all said, "It's time." Band Off then performed the same song and chatted backstage. This time, something was different from the post-concert storyline. Keith saw Cece being held captive in a car, tied up and unconscious. He didn't have time to save Cece because the doctor and off member Dimitri picked her up in a van, while Autry was already on the road with Nina in another car. In Autry's storyline, he was again approached by 2 policemen, but this time the leader of the We group showed up to save him. The leader appeared as a mini-market cashier and pulled out a rifle to beat up the police. The leader then told Autry to leave while he would deal with Nina. Unfortunately, a policeman was still alive and shot the leader. Meanwhile, the doctor also encountered obstacles along the way. The mysterious man suddenly appeared to intercept their car. However, the fight didn't last long because Autry immediately came to shoot the man dead. However, Cece was not in the car that the mysterious man was driving. On the other hand, DH had just arrived in another life alone. He was greeted by a beekeeper, but when the beekeeper's helmet was removed, it was not a human, but a large fly. Sometime later, DH moved on to another situation where he was participating in an inter-drummer competition. Nina and 2 other criminals, as well as the doctor and members of the band Off, were there to watch DH, and as a result, DH won the competition easily. However, the battle between Nina and Doctor's camps had just begun. They attacked each other until one by one the criminals were caught off guard. But Doctor finally lost to Nina's attack, even though the woman was killed by Autry and Dimitri. In his dying state, Doctor advised that Off should continue, because their music would now free the minds of the listeners and provide enlightenment. The doctor also gave them a BDA lab business card with their office address on it. Shortly afterwards, a fellow BDA scientist called the doctor to report that the success rate of their drug formula had now returned to maximum levels, and Off was invited to the BDA headquarters to continue their career journey. Just as the band was leaving, Nina got up. Meanwhile, the band Off arrived at BDA headquarters. The scientist who greeted their arrival hurried them to a special room to begin the music recording process. The officer explained the procedure, including giving them LSD before recording. Long story short, after a long recording process, Keith entered a room marked No Entry. Here, he became the doorman of another life in a beekeeper's uniform to welcome Cici. He then gave Cici a bag containing a DVD. Shortly afterwards, the other members of the band Off followed suit, also wearing beekeepers' uniforms. After they left, the BDA scientists stored the recordings in a suitcase. Sometime later, a young man received a package containing an Off vinyl album, and this man then listened to the music in his room. However, when he paid attention to the lyrics sheet, he saw something shimmering in the paper. And he realized that there was a side of the paper that could be torn off and consumed. Instantly, he put the substance in his mouth. The man moved on to another life. He landed in front of Cece's coffee shop, You Are Here, where another visitor arrived asking for a free ticket to see the band Off. Jack Rogers, Keith's source for his online life, also appeared at the place. Jack told Cece that he heard music related to Cece when the alien abducted him. Not only that, Nina showed up at Cece's shop to ask for the DVD that Keith gave her. But she was immediately knocked out by the leader of the We group to take the necklace that Nina had stolen from him in the previous fight. Cece then ran to the Off concert and performed with them. Long story short, 6 months later, Cece and Keith were living together peacefully.